How are you
What's up?
guys?
Good. Doing good.
Very good.
Uh, yeah.
Sorry
Getting a
about
little
that.
hungry, but I think I should be able to last the hour. I got some
Mukbang!
water. Oh shit.
Oh shit!
Shit. Get all
I
sloppy with it.
know. That would be nice.
For the
Can't afford to
Patreons.
do it with the Ozempic.
What a CLS eats in a day. Eat dinner with me.
Nothing.
Hi, welcome to Blood Talk Small Talk, where we aim to provide a deeper understanding of the teamwork it takes to ensure quality care in a healthcare setting. Tune in for a mix of serious science and casual conversation, and you might be surprised to learn just how much goes on behind the scenes. I'm your host, Mars.
And I'm your host, Paige. Today, we invite back our previous two guests, Ha and Sun. If you remember them, they were here talking about their
Oh, hey.
experience during the
Didn't see you guys
training
there.
previously. Welcome back,
Sorry.
Sun. And
sorry.
today we invite them back again for to talk about exactly the same program but on a different side of the coin. So they'll be here as a trainer and telling us about their experience as a trainer. Let's get started to hear all about their journey. I guess, do you want to introduce yourself again, just for our new viewers?
Yeah, of course. Hello, I'm Ha. I was classmates with Mars and Sun 9 years ago. Whew.
I got ready for you to say, "Hey, I'm Ha. If you want to know about me, go watch my previous episode."
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, I'm Ha.
That was like your setup was like, "Hi, I'm Ha." I was like, "What are you gonna drop on me again?"
Oh, I can change it.
No, it's okay.
Okay, all right. Hi, I'm Ha, as seen in previous episodes. So if you want to know more about me, just go back and watch it. But if you don't want to, I am Ha. I was in the same class as Sun and Mars about 9 years ago, and I currently work at a hospital in microbiology.
I am Sun. I ditto to what Ha said. But I work in a blood bank instead, in a also a hospital. And yeah, glad to be
Yeah.
here.
Welcome
Well,
back.
thank you and welcome to both of you. Let's jump right in. What motivated you to become a trainer or take this role?
They forced us to do it, but I also did want to. Going through the program, even during the program, I feel like I had opportunity kind of like to like collaborate with the other students. Like you never knew everything, and there was always someone that knew more than you. So yeah, you would kind of teach each other, help each other out, trying to explain certain concepts. And also while training, like I would notice sometimes some of the trainers kind of forgotten a lot of the theory, and then that would make the training part a little disconnected from the didactic portion. You wouldn't understand how what you're doing, hands-on applies directly, or how it relates to what you're learning. The context of it all. So that's, why I wanted to put in good effort with the training. And also that's my focus when I train the students. Context is everything. Clinical picture, I think that's what they call it.
I agree with Sun. Yeah, I felt like some of the training was very jargony. Like they just got like into the deep end. I'm like, wait, what? Like, how did we get here? So
Yeah.
that was kind of the motivation. I
can do it better.
Yeah, I mean, I like to teach anyway, but it's nice to be able to improve on it. And I learn things myself. Like you learn best when you teach, because then, like Sun said, like sometimes you get a different perspective from a different person. Yeah.
But also, you're like not really an expert at something until you teach more. Like, so it also reinforces your own knowledge because you have to know what you're teaching, right? So
yeah, it keeps it fresh. I mean, 9 years later, I feel like I could probably take at least the blood bank portion of the boards again. Maybe after like a day of studying and asking people what the answers are. I think I could pass it.
For me, actually, the first time I have to train, it was kind of like sudden by force. We don't really have a choice. Not really by force. We're rotating,
They're just
right?
like,
So
oh,
it's my turn to
you're training
train.
today, okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
everyone
Yeah,
has to do it.
sorry. But after training, I think I really enjoyed it, so I kind of volunteered to do it. And after I did that, I feel like it bring me to be more humble because I found out that I actually don't know as much as I thought I know.
Oh, the
Or I,
questions.
yeah, like
Some of those
all the
good
questions
questions.
sometimes it make me second guess myself. Like, did I really know this subject? Like, where did you get this question from? Like, it's really keep things fresh, and like the more I guess the deeper I know about this subject, I feel like the more I think I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. It's always more things to learn. Like
Yeah.
after more than 10 years, like I should really know everything in blood bank, right? But
Isn't that the
not
nature of like
really.
knowledge in general? Like, when you first learn about something, there's like a point where you think you know everything, but then after like a certain threshold, you realize like, oh, I'm really stupid, or not stupid, but like there's a lot that I don't know. Um,
Mhm.
that's like in any facet of, any kind of learning,
Yeah, so
especially with this stuff.
that's why I really like it because I really enjoy all these questions, especially like the one I have to be like, I don't know, let me get back to you because it kind of keep things fresh for me, and I'm be like the one to tell you like, sorry, I don't know.
If
And like
and
sometimes it's kind of feel embarrassing to say that, but I kind of get used to it.
Yeah. True.
if anything, it's like good, right? Because at least you know you didn't hit a plateau, or at least you know you're still open to learning new things. Um, I like it when the students ask me something and I'm like, you know what? I don't know. Let me look into it and I'll get back to you. Like
Yeah,
it really also helps us do our job better, I feel like.
Yeah.
Cause yeah, sometimes they ask things I'm like, I never really thought of that. Let me look into it and I'll let you know. And if I can't find it, at least I'll direct you to where
to
you can.
somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So yeah, I really like that aspect too. So how did you think your own training experience influence how you train like the current student?
Oh, I think
Uh,
we kind of answered that, huh? At least for me,
yeah.
I answered it. I don't know if
Same
Sun had
here.
anything to add.
Yeah, I guess realizing that over time, if you don't, refresh the information, because I don't know if this is like safe to say, but like a lot of the stuff that you learn in the program, like you will not need on a day-to-day basis. It might come up like once every like year or something, but it's important to remember that stuff. But you don't need it on like a day-to-day basis. And even if you forget, you have people next to you as long as you're working, that kind of a shift. So yeah, the training, going through the program, when you ask the question, and then you're kind of, they don't know the answers. You're like, oh, that's a little weird. But that's because, you're learning these things fresh. And for them, they've been doing it for so long that, they don't necessarily, it's not, it's weird to say it's not important, but it's not like top priority for them to know like all the little esoteric pieces of knowledge. But, seeing that, I made it like kind of my goal to retain as much of the information as possible. I think being a trainer helps with that because you have to keep constantly reinforcing it. Um, yeah.
So do you think it make you understand the other trainer more when you were training? Because you had mentioned previously that like you uh had experience where some of the trainer do not remember
Yeah. I
their
mean,
like core
I constantly,
materials.
yeah, like I'm constantly being reminded of how little, like you said earlier, how little I know or what I don't know. Whenever they ask questions or, why do we do it like this? Like, oh, hold up. That's a good question. Like, is it, a lot of times the answer is, just because that's how I was trained, but there's the reason why you're trained that way is because there's an actual like didactic lecture reason for it. But then you kind of forget that stuff. Because sometimes it slows you down knowing all this stuff. Like sometimes it's just more efficient to, be able to automate mentally the tasks. depending on the subject, depending on the department, and case by case.
Yeah. Mars, you also a trainer now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you feel like, making that transition?
At first I was very nervous because I was like, oh God, am I experienced enough to be able to teach these students? But over the years, I think I grew to really like it. For some reason, every time I hear that they passed, like they come back and like share that they passed, I feel so proud. It's like, oh, my children, I've helped them enough, and
They
it's
can
like,
fly.
yeah, and
Spread your wings.
it's always they're very thankful. They're like, you really helped me a lot throughout the program, even if you didn't know the answers, like the resources that you shared, or like the way that they rely on you emotionally, almost, because you can relate to having done the same program, having been there in their shoes just a couple years ago. But in terms of, I've changed my training style as I've gone like through it throughout the years, and I realized it's actually helped me a lot with my personal interactions. Like, having been becoming a trainer, I feel like I've become a better communicator. Um a lot of it is also just kind of like listening to them, and making sure. One thing that I really, I guess, hated when I was a student is when they'd be like, do you understand? Do you understand? You get it? Or something like that when they're training. And,
I think there's one person I have in mind that says, do you understand?
but, I've learned to be like, does that make sense? If not, do you want me to explain it a different way? Or just like, it helps you figure out that not everybody learns the same way. And so that's kind of like how I try to tailor my training also, where it's like, are you a hands-on person? How comfortable do you feel about this? Do you want me to walk you through it? Stuff like that. And it's like, I always tell them, if you have a question, feel free to interrupt me in between, because I know how difficult it is. Sometimes, I'm talking a lot. It might leave your head and you won't remember what you have to ask. I can always try and figure out where I left off. But if like you really need to know, ask now. And so that's just kind of what has helped me from being a trainer from being a trainee to becoming a trainer. And so I think it's really nice having been able to step up to this role, because, we all went through it, and now we can give back to our program and our hospital, push out like little baby CLS who are ready to go out into the world. And it just makes me so proud whenever they're like, I passed.
That's
I
why
got
I'm
a job.
senior.
Oh,
All the
because
CLSs
you have a
that
lot
come
of
out, their
juniors.
sons juniors, yeah. The first, the second, the third.
Oh, that's good. That's a very good way to think of it. Once you said like you changing your training styles over the year, what do you change? Just like how to talk to them?
Yeah, I think so. Because before, it used to just be like, this is the way I was taught. This is the way I do it. This is how you do it, right? But then also, like, I try and listen more, and then feedback, try and understand, like, did the way that I teach them this, does it make sense to them? Or like, everybody has different learning styles. Some, they just want you to like walk them through it while they take notes. Some of them, they want you to do it side by side. And then, you want to build their confidence also. That's another thing that I've learned. It's like, don't be discouraging if they do something wrong. Just be like, like, that's not it, but it's okay. Or like, if they mess up on something, it's fine. It's a learning experience. Don't worry. But next time, be sure to be careful that you don't do this. And stuff like that. Like, I know there are some people who get like really tense, especially around the analyzers. Like, they won't let the students touch anything because they're afraid it's gonna break. But it's like, you know what? It's part of the experience. If it breaks, as long as you didn't wreck it.
Well, what about you, Sun and Ha? What do you has your training style changed? What you find that like something that you like as a trainee, do you like it also as a trainer, or you find or your preference change?
Well, I guess my priorities of training has changed as a trainer. It's kind of goes against about what I said with the whole standardization thing, but in our department, when we train, we actually have a very what's it like structured program. It's separated into like weeks, days, and then you kind of go from the basics, like the type-in screens, and then you build on that. And at a certain point, you get to maybe like the second week where I'm under the impression that they've learned everything new at that point. There's nothing else. Everything that comes after that is just you repurpose the previous kind of procedures in order to achieve something. Like for instance, elution is to create like artificial plasmas. You can use that to do an antibody ID. Instead of identifying antibodies from the plasma, you're doing it from the red blood cells. But to do that, first you have to pull it into a solution so that you can attach to other ones. So, being able to link those things together, kind of expand on it's like the blood bank verse or something like universe. And making sure that they understand it. Because before I used to be, because of the structure of the program, I would be so stressed about making sure that they hit like X number of specimens a day, trying to finish everything that was assigned for that day. But then over time, I realized that whatever I don't finish, like the next person, the next day will cover it. And it's not like I'm hoisting the responsibility over to them, because I used to feel bad about doing that. Like, because I didn't, finish my end, they're gonna have to pick it up, the slack. But towards the end of the 4-week rotation, they always have extra time. But ever since I actually started taking my time, it seems like we hit the 4 weeks like almost perfectly. So maybe I have to find a balance. It's, a balance between providing them as much information as possible and also making sure that they get to see as much of it as possible. It's like, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out, but it's something that I'm prioritizing.
What about you, Ha?
The training at my hospital is a little different. So my hospital takes on like 12 students a year. We have 6 students in the spring and then 6 in the fall. So I'm like constantly training different students all the time. So I think to adapt to that, I think when I train them, I just kind of ask them like basic questions like, oh, what do you know already? Like, and then from there, I just kind of build on top of it, making sure that they get the, like, from specimen to like final result, like make sure that they get every single like step along the way. And then just any like vocabulary, any jargon that they don't understand, I ask them like, do you know what this means? And then we just go from there. Every student at the step that I'm training them, like they've all been different. So I think it's good that I ask ahead of time right before I get into training them. So that's my system.
Are you the only one who trained them, or you guys also kind of rotate?
No, they all rotate, like, and then like, as a tech, like I rotate different benches in microbiology too. So I've trained different students at different points in time on different benches as I'm rotating as well. It's just whatever's posted on the schedule. But I do end up like always training somebody like every week because of that. So it's very
yeah.
Is
it not overwhelming to have like 12 students a year?
Not really.
Do they make good company?
Most of the time they do. Yeah, I think
socially.
So. This last class, they're really cool.
Nice.
Yeah. For the most part, they're all really good students.
Are there any aspects of like the trainer role that you think you find it particularly challenging?
Oh, talking a lot. Like, I think by the end of the day...
What do you mean talking a lot? I thought that would be the least of your worry.
No, but like physically talking, like my mouth gets so dry, and then I feel like
always cough.
I get really tired because like when you teach, you're like doing double work. So I physically am tired, but I enjoy it. So that's the part that I would say is probably
What about you, Sun?
Definitely the talking. I totally forgot, but like I'm just remembering now, especially since now right now my eyes are like a little dry. But yeah, like my mucous membranes just like get totally dried out. I always feel at the end of like a long training day that I feel like I'm getting sick. Sore throat, watery eyes, and just brain fog from so much, like jostling so many things. Because I feel like I'm not only trying to, say process what I'm saying in my head, but I also have to like think about two different people and how they're receiving what I'm saying, and having to make sure I'm getting constant feedback, paying attention to their body language. Are they following along? Like, do I have to kind of not so much pick on them, but make sure, ask them questions to see like comprehension and stuff like that. So yeah, the physical kind of demand is something that I totally blindsided me. And also I don't talk a lot. Recently I have started yapping. It's pretty fun. But, most of the years past training, like when I was training, that was probably like as much work talking as I was doing at work, like for like a couple months, like condensed into like a day. So, yeah, Ha's right about that one.
Yeah. What about you, Mars?
My vocal cords are pretty dead also, maybe towards like the second half of the day, because I also don't really talk a lot. Sometimes it's a little like mentally taxing to train every day. They've actually cut back the amount of time in which I train because they've noticed that I get burned out. It's not that I don't like it. It's just kind of like I need some days at work where it's like only me thinking in my head of like what I'm doing rather than like focusing, on giving them a good training experience, because you really do want to train them the best that you can. And also it's kind of like for some benches where it's from core lab, like stats are very important, and the amount of times where it's kind of like, especially in the beginning, you don't want to rush them, but you also want to keep up with your turnaround time. And so that's kind of one of the things that I have a little bit of an issue with. But I've learned to be like, okay, hold on, let me clean up the pending, and then as it's okay, like we'll continue on from there. But that's probably really it. The vocal cords, and then sometimes if it's too many days in a row, it gets a little bit mentally taxing. I don't know how to yap for that long. Like, what if it's a student that you don't really get along with? Like, how are you gonna break the silence? Like, I don't know.
Yes, for me, it's also, I guess, the mental, like, challenging to have to keep someone entertaining for a whole day, multiple days at times, on a topic that I guess some of them are not really interested in. Like, sometimes you can really see the trainee, they're like, I just want to get through this. I don't need to know this. But I'm like, you do need to know this. And that's what I find it like. I think the mental challenges is real. I don't know how strict your trainer program is, but what I have done in the past just to keep myself, like keep my sanity intact, is I would train half a day and then I give practice for the remaining 4 hours.
Oh, yeah, I wish we could do something
So
like that.
I'll be like training, because each day there's a topic that we have to cover. So I'll make sure I cover those topics. I show example. I have them practice in front of me. So make sure that they get the technique and all the understanding correctly. And then the other half, I'll have them do the practice, do more like unknowns, have them work on unknowns on the procedure that I trained previously. And then like an hour before they are dismissed, then I would go over and then review with them. So, that would give me a little bit of time for myself, just to keep my sanity intact. Because I found that like, with someone for the whole 8 hour was a little too much for me. I think I couldn't do that.
Do I just give them hella dilutions in core lab, like for the like, okay, you can practice the second half of the day, dilute this like a bajillion times.
I did that. Like we had I think one of the patients we had was really, really high troponins. We had to dilute it 4 times before we can analyze. So then we do have extra sample for that patient. So I'll be like, here you go. And it take them 4 hours to get the results. And I'll be like, yes, I do need that. But it is also practice because they were second guessing themselves a lot. Like, did I do it correctly? Why does it take this many dilution? It's part of the experience. And it's kind of gave me a break also. So, I mean, if you want that, yes.
So I just thought about this. Like, sometimes training is harder than actually working on the bench, like mental load, because on the bench you're only worried about your own work. Like, say you're doing in blood bank antibody ID, you just focus on that. But then when you have the students, like first we have 2 of them at the same time, so I'm running like in parallel and making sure that I'm keeping on track of the other one. Sometimes like a little issue will come up on one of them, so then now they're kind of forking off in a different direction, and the other person is doing a different direction. So I have to keep track of things, and oftentimes I kind of get them mixed up. But a lot of times, hopefully by that point they're somewhat autonomous and they can kind of like, oh, actually no, we're supposed to do this. So I've had a couple of instances where they kind of correct me, like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess we are doing that. Huh? You guys passed the test. Good job. You guys are paying attention. But yeah, it is a little hard balancing the pace with multiple students. There's always going to be some level of a discrepancy. And yeah, I still struggle. Like, do I kind of cater to the slower, or do I kind of leave that person behind? And there's really, I haven't figured out like a good way to go about it.
So what strategy do you use to ensure that your trainees are well prepared for their jobs, like, or their future jobs actually?
Build their confidence.
Yeah.
That was
for
one
the
of
technical
the things.
stuff. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That was one of the things that I struggled with most when I first became a CLS, was like, I didn't have confidence in myself, because a lot of the trainers that I had, at least in core lab where I ended up, right, they kind of helicoptered me. They didn't really trust me enough to like let me do things. Sometimes some wouldn't even let me be hands-on about it. And so throughout the course of like, because I only train a couple of benches, right? It's like Tox, UA, and Coac. Sometimes I do train the other ones, but those are my primary. And throughout the course of that rotation for them, I really try to let them like build their confidence in it. So like when it comes to the part about them filing or like anything, I'll just be like, okay, I've taught you what to do. I'm standing here. I'm watching. I'm not going to correct you until I see something wrong. And so like I have on Cerner that like block thing before you verify, it gives a pop-up so that you can you have to hit okay again before it verifies. So at least if they're like a gamer and rapid click, at least I have that stop between them. But like I want them to be able to think for themselves and then, build that confidence. So when they are CLSs, have their license and working by themselves, they feel like they know how to do something. Because around the time where I trained in chemistry, we were switching from SunQuest to Cerner. So I got no experience filing chemistry. So I didn't even know what I was supposed to look at, like what values to compare for like delta checks and stuff like that. And that was probably the thing that I think is most important, helping build their confidence so that when they're by themselves, they're not completely terrified.
What about you, Ha?
Verbal pop quizzes. This is like for the technical stuff. So in micro, we have a MALDI. So that basically just gives you an ID just by like taking a little bit of bacteria, smearing it on a slide, and then it just tells you what the ID is. But the thing is, for like the ASCP, you need to know like all the biochemicals that lead to the ID of the bacteria. So on the bench, when we physically show them, we're just doing MALDI. So I give them verbal pop quizzes on like the biochemical just on the side while we wait for like that stuff to ID. Just because they'll need to know it on their quiz.
Yeah, it's still important to know, even though we have technology to help us now. But it's still important to know how to, do it. Isn't like the multi, isn't like the E. coli, it's still not, I don't know, was it E. coli that you can't identify using the multi?
I mean, you can. It just depends on like the morphology. If it looks a certain way and it
Okay.
says E. coli, you have to do like extra testing to confirm it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, so like, that's why like you still kind of need
Yeah.
to know. I
Yeah.
still remember
Or like
something.
if the MALDI goes down, you should know how to do it, how to ID
Yeah.
bacteria without it. It just takes longer, but yeah, it's good to know. And then, in micro, it's like solving a puzzle. Not everything is just like detected or not detected. It's like, here's a puzzle, you figure it out. And then a lot of stuff, like, it's not textbook. There's weird stuff, especially at the hospitals that we work at. So it's also good to know how to approach it using different tests. So verbal pop quizzes is what I use to help the students.
Side quest. I just remember something when you said like, it's not all like set and stone. I have this one doctor. I know it's kind of like track a little bit, but I have this one doctor one time have given me a swab. One swab. But on the order detail, asking for the culture for eye, nose, throat, and I don't know what that order he swapped. It was one swab.
Hopefully in that order.
What's the point of doing a swab? Wait, is multi-site
What are they
swabbing
looking
like a
for?
thing?
It was a newborn. This one, the patient is a newborn, so they were, and the mom had some infections, and they were trying to see if it's infected the baby and like where the infections might have been, during the birthing process. But even if the baby was not infected, I think the baby is infected.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
what's
It was one swab, and
why are
we
they
were like,
saving
what
swabs?
order?
Like,
I was like, in what order was this swab?
they just went like whoop from top to bottom in one like
Hopefully.
stroke.
You hope, but
Front to back, front to back.
I don't know. It's a mystery. When we tried to clarify, they couldn't tell, so we just have. I mean, either case, we would have to ask for a reflection, but we're like, I don't know. I hope it was. Yeah.
No, they just start at the top and then run it all across the body. Hopefully, I'm hoping that's the way it goes.
Yeah. So it's like a puzzle. So sometimes I have one of those doctor, and it's kind of entertaining in the way. I mean, I love those things. Yeah, Sun. What about you?
I try to have them at some point, like, basically teach me. Like, I always want them to be able to, like, reteach what I'm teaching them. If not on the same day, then later on, like, tell me what's the next thing. And then some, a lot of times they get pretty close. They might be a little off, by a couple of degrees, like, oh, should we do this? And then if it is off, I'll ask them, why do you think that? And a lot of times at least I find that I can get into their understanding. And then I just have to make a minor tweak, like, oh, well, it's because you're prioritizing this, but in this situation, you should look at this variable. So then, slowly introducing things, and then by asking them, I can see the gaps in the knowledge. Maybe I didn't properly explain something before, and then, fill in between then. Another thing, kind of unrelated, is I always like to tell them, especially during training, I'll always remember the things where, I made a big mistake in the past. Yeah. But definitely, yeah, like I tell them, I share as much as I can remember all the common pitfalls. Look out for this because, oftentimes I'm very aware of how stupid I am, how dumb I can be. At least I try to be. I try to, every time I make a mistake, like, how did I do this? Or if someone makes a mistake, like, could I have done that? And, I try to constantly catalog like these mistakes, and then try to share that as much as I can. Just, because I guess by doing that, you kind of help guide them into like the right mindset of either a blood
Okay.
bank or a microbiologist, hematologist, whatever. So yeah.
Can you share example of like a memorable success story that you have experienced as a trainer, or like what you find it most rewarding as you training the new students?
Every time they come back and say, "We passed, we're so happy, thank you, you did so much." I don't know why. Every time I almost want to cry because I'm like, my babies
Were
have
you
grown up.
are you more happy that they passed than when you were the one getting the passing score?
Honestly, I cried when I passed too, so maybe I'm just emotional, but
Emotional,
no,
unstable?
I think no. Well, like there was a lot of stress, like building up to the ASCP, right? And then like emotions were high. I was like, oh dear God, did I pass? And so like seeing the word pass on the screen was enough to just like let it all go. But
A tiny little pass.
yeah. But
I swear I did not know what that means. Like at the end, I was like, PASS. What? PASS? Oh, okay. And then I went home and I still didn't believe that I passed.
I stared at it for a really long time.
I stared at it for a long time, but then when I left, I was like, did I read it right? And I just second guessed until like for like weeks and weeks until I got my license. Like, I think I did it. I think I passed. And I had to ask someone, I was like, yeah, what does this look legit?
I remember you told me.
I actually asked the proctor to print it and asked him to tell me what it said. And then I was like, no, you're passed, you're done, you're good. And I was like,
Get out
are
of
you
here.
sure? And I was like, yes, you're good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What about for you, son? What do you find it like, most rewarding or memorable as a
So as a
trainer?
side question, is it true that like you can't have like a heterozygous like Lewis A, Lewis B?
You cannot have a heterozygous?
Like you can't have both Lewis A and Lewis B. Is that true or is that like
No,
false?
you can.
Oh, you can?
false.
Okay. So then never mind that. But whenever like a student teaches me something, so I think this year like one of the students kind of mentioned something. I don't think it was that, but it was something else where he just noticed a pattern that I never had picked up before. And I looked, I was like, I think you're right, dude. So little points like that when I can learn from them. Even as simple as, someone telling me that copy paste works in this Cerner app or something, Cerner program. Like, that's sweet, dude. Like, my job is now easier because of you. Thank you.
Wait, what? It worked?
Yeah, like you can copy and paste. You can't right click, but you control
Oh yeah.
C, control V. Like
Wait.
for comments, you could do that.
Did you not know that? How long did you
Yeah.
not know that?
Michael taught me that.
Are you
was like, wow.
freaking serious?
Yeah, he taught me
I
that.
did not know that.
See, it's the students. They're the future.
Oh my goodness.
I like being able to try to get into other people's heads and trying to understand like what is their level of knowledge, their understanding of like vocabulary, and then how can we kind of like get together? Because for instance, like typing cross means different things depending on who you're talking to. Even the word blood can have different meanings. Some people, blood bankers, when you say blood, we think, well, red blood cells, plasma, platelets. What are you talking about? But then the nurses, they just assume it's red blood cells.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
it's just sometimes even if you say red blood cells, they're like, "What is that?" I
And
say,
they won't,
"Oh,
yeah,
PRBC."
they don't
Like,
accept.
yeah, I guess, sure.
It has to be like
What are you
PRBC.
saying?
But like, there's no PRBC. It's red blood cells. Red blood cells. Like, you're like, no, it's
Yeah.
packed. No, it's red blood cells. But yeah, I
Sorry, we got a little
and then-
sidetracked.
No, it's good. And like also, I guess the amount of blood. I have a doctor. Well, I mean, we're in a training hospital, right? I have a doctor who activated an MTP on patients who have bled 8 ounces. So, yeah. And he was like, my patient is about to die. If you don't give me blood right now, you're killing a patient. Like, I need blood right now. And I was telling him, like, you can have uncross-matched blood and I'll tube it to you right now. But you're demanding for a cross-matched blood, which I can't provide because you
It's not
haven't even drawn a
possible.
patient. Okay, I don't even have a specimen in my hand, so I can't cross-match because there's nothing to cross-match with. And for you to demanding something impossible to save a patient who bleeding 8 ounces, it's a little...
Yeah, I think it would have been easier for him to turn back the clock, like to go back in time. I think that's easier than cross-match without a specimen, I think.
Yeah.
So maybe you should have told him, do that.
It just like, I think for him, he doesn't understand that like for a cross match to work or for a cross match to be performed, I do need a patient specimen to test it against, right? But he was like, no, I have a patient who is heavily bleeding. The patient is about to die. And we were actually, I didn't know at the time that the patient only bled 8 ounces. So we found out like a day later after the case closed because after that, I have to report it, right? That a possible delay of blood, it's like patient safety. Even though there was no delay in our part, which we have emergency blood that able to provide right away. But there was still, like that conversations and like picking it up, tubing it to the patients. So I kind of reported that just on the precautious side. And because of that, we investigate. And that's when I found out the patient bled total, not at that time. So the time that the patient or the doctor was on the phone with me, the patient haven't even bled 8 ounces yet. At the end of the operation, that's total amount was 8 ounces.
Oh. I've heard stories where like upstairs when they see the blood, especially if you haven't seen it like ever, like a little blood looks like a lot. I think like biologically we're supposed to freak out when we see blood. And
that's
at least
why
in our facility, like a lot of times they call like NTPs and it's, they call it and then you're waiting around like 40 minutes, like, are they going to come down and pick it up or what?
And just for the context for people who does not know the acronyms, MTP is massive transfusions. It's like when the patient is bleeding massively and we're thinking that, the patients the patient could die from losing blood. So that's why we activate the protocols and trying to get the blood to the patient as soon as possible. Sorry to interrupt, but please continue.
Yeah, I mean, the important thing about the massive transfusion protocol is that it basically switches the gears in the blood bank from prioritizing safety over speed and then now you're prioritizing speed over safety. That's my way of understanding. Obviously, you do try to, get as safe as possible, but I think in a lot of like blood bank procedures, there's a lot of redundancies. And it allows us to kind of like remove some of that just because, it's better to give like the non-optimal blood as long as they're getting something.
Because at least you have a patient to save.
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to give them like the wrong ABO blood type, but like, for instance, if they have like other antibodies that are non-ABO, you might, be more inclined like, okay, we'll roll the dice with this one. I think someone had a question.
I can't remember if this was actually something we learned in the lecture or not, but our instructor, wasn't she saying something about like if the patient is profusely bleeding, don't you just give them something that that they're gonna bleed out anyways?
Yeah.
So you basically give them something that's compatible, but maybe not be most I guess the best compatible units. Like if the patient, for example, if the patient is preferably or heavily bleeding, right? The patient is not retaining that unit inside. So even like what Sun is saying, that the patients may have an antibody. Let's say the patient have anti-kill. It's not, most of the people have kill, so they're not having the anti-kill. But let's say this patient somehow have an anti-kill, but the patient is heavily bleeding. So even if you not have time to do a full cross match, would take like 40 minutes to perform. But by that time, you won't have a patient. You will have a compatible unit, but you won't have a patient to save, right? Because the patient would have died already. So you would give the unit without knowing that units have or not have a kill. So the patient could have developed a reaction to it, but we can treat the reaction that the patient have at the end. However, if you think about it, the patient is heavily bleeding. The patient is not retained that unit inside the patient long enough to have the reaction. So the patient would have bleed that out. So a lot of time if we have like a MTP patients or massive transfusions, or the patient with like car accident or gunshot wound where they using 10, 20, 40 units in an operation. So maybe
You guys
like
get
the first,
fun cases.
oh no, like
We
that
rarely
last
get stuff
weekend,
like that.
this last weekend, I have a patient who used 12 cooler in 3 hours. Yeah.
Can
Damn.
you do blood bank maths for us? How many units is that?
So in a cooler, it has 6 RBC, 6 plasma, and 1 platelet. And this patient go through 12 cooler in 3 hours. And after that, it didn't stop. It slowed down, but it didn't stop. So that's
Let me see. Okay.
so 12 times
So you said 12 times 6?
6.
Times
So that
6 times about 325, 0.325 for the liters. So that's 23 liters of blood. I think the standard body is, at least female body is like 5 liters.
5.
Yeah, that's
So
about
say
4
like you,
times their volume in blood
volume.
just
So
flushing.
you,
3 hours?
yeah, with in 3 hours. So you replace the patient volumes 3 times already. So by the end, you're not really, it's not patient blood inside of them anymore. So what we do is, if it's a known antibody, and the patient, the case that I'm giving example is kill. So we can find it easily in lab. But in the case if the patient have multiple antibody and we only have like, let's say 6 unit on hand, that would be compatible for the patient, right? So the first 30, 40 units will give something that the patient would bleed out and they're not going to retain. So, and then the surgeon will have to call us, be like, hey, we're getting ready to close up. Then we'll give those units that the patient's going to be retained inside and be like, now you're using this. So the patients will get a compatible units that like retain inside of them. So that what we have done in the past. I mean, as much as possible, we do try to provide cross-match blood, but in some case, we do have, like what Sun had mentioned, we prioritize the patients. We try to save life, so patient life, and then we can deal with complications, any transfusion reactions, any complications that come after. At least we have a patient there for us to save and work on, right? Versus we're like, no, hold on. We're just going to take 40 minutes here, but the patient is bleeding. So you only have like 5 minutes before someone bled out. And 5 minutes and 40 minutes. So that's the math, isn't it?
Do you have a success story?
Honestly, when a student has, they're like almost a couple of months into the micro rotation, and there was like a concept that, they finally got because they were training with me. I was like, oh, okay. I was glad I was able to do that for you.
Oh, I have one more success story.
Yes.
Sometimes when you're like looking at like results and then you see a past student had verified a result, you're like, oh shit, like there they are, and you kind of wonder, oh, what site are they at, stuff like that. So no, it's good to see that, oh, they actually were able to achieve what they wanted to, and especially cool to end up in blood bank.
Yes. So, and how has being a trainer changed your perspective for the CLS as a profession?
It hasn't really changed it, but it reinforced that the CLS is
The
only as good as the
importance of
training.
it.
Yeah. So
That's
it just
true.
reinforced my beliefs.
I guess it's given me like a sense of agency in terms of like being able to mold the future generation. Like obviously, there's a limited number of students and trainees that I expose. That's a weird way to say it. That we come into contact with on like an annual basis. But hopefully, whatever I teach them, because I think our rotation, our clinical rotation is usually the first one. When the students just come in, like they almost like back to back. We get 2 rotations, and then after that, we're done for the whole year. And then they do that before they hit the lectures. And a lot of times, by the time they get to the lecture, like they're the only ones who have gone through like a blood bank rotation. So it seems like sometimes I hear stories where like they're able to, share that knowledge with their cohort. So it's always a good thing to see that.
What about you, Mars?
I don't even remember the question. I'm sorry, I didn't understand. What was it?
It's okay. Been
Which
a
one are
long
we
day
on?
for all of us. So it was just asking. We're talking about like how being a trainer change your perspective for a CLS profession.
I don't think becoming a trainer really changed. I guess maybe it reinforced the fact that we should know stuff from our didactics. Because a lot of the CLSs, I think, who trained us were from the old generation, and not very many could reiterate some of the clinical concepts that we learned. And so becoming a trainer and how it like changed my perspective of being a CLS is I also really try and correlate what I'm training on the bench with the concepts that are learned in class, just to help connect it together. And so they realize like, oh, there's a reason why we're learning this in school when this is all we do on the bench,
Yeah, I think that's important. And I feel like I listen to all of you. It's kind of bringing back, and for me to think like when I'm like on the bench training the students, I felt like maybe I need to be like keep that in mind, because sometimes I don't connect like the theory with the bench. I feel like this is the procedure, how you follow it and why, but not really bringing it back to like the didactic, or like what's the theory or why you need to know this theory, because this is how you apply it when you're on the bench. So yeah, thank you so much everyone for coming and returning to us as a guest today. Again, it's another night chat and having a good time. Today, thank you for sharing your story, your journey, and the insight of from your being a trainee to becoming a trainer, and your experience, your thoughts are. So it was very interesting to listen to your experience and your thoughts. If any of you have any other questions for our guests, please leave them down below. We do read them and we will reply to them. Yeah, and if you have any other questions, please leave that in the comment down below as well. We're happy to read them and respond to them. And always remember, your blood tells you the story of your health. Thanks for watching. Bye.